following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everybody, welcome to Eye on Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz along with City Councilwoman Jess King. She's a familiar face, both from here and of course the council meetings.
Right.
So we appreciate your coming by tonight just to talk about a bunch of stuff. I know you're swamped with city business. You just, I read in the paper, started your own law practice.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
you've got your hands full, and you're teaching something at the university too.
Yep.
So you got your hands in a lot of stuff, and you're very busy. So I really, really appreciate you taking time to be here.
No problem.
Anyway, I guess the first thing that we should probably talk about is, as we're taping this, there is a meeting going on upstairs. It's the second of two public informational type meetings on stormwater detention.
Right.
Out at West Haven Golf Course. Were you able to go to, either the first one that they had earlier this week or the one a little bit tonight?
I attended a little bit this evening, and then I definitely got a report about how Tuesday went. There were approximately 30 people in the audience on Tuesday, and about 3 of the city councilors made it to receive feedback. And we've been getting feedback via email and letters still from various citizens about the proposal.
Yeah. What are you hearing? What are they saying?
Well, I think people are definitely, sometimes the devil's in the details,
Yeah.
and I think people are very concerned about the idea of the municipality owning 2 golf courses for the perception that provides during this kind of economy. People are definitely concerned about just land use in general. Is this a good idea? People are concerned about their property values, which have already been depressed. And it's interesting to look at the other scenarios that we were presented in the city council workshop and to say, is this an opportunity for us to still try to present, reach the goal with total suspended solids and other stormwater management? Because on the other hand, we've obviously had environmental pressure to deal with this, and then legislative pressure from the state to deal with this, and we need to do something. And now the issue is, does small d democracy work? Is it our job to say, well, maybe that in statistics seems like the best idea, but maybe it's not the best idea for some of these other externalities. So I'm glad we're having this process to get the feedback.
So the way it would work then, Jess, is what? The city would purchase the entire golf course, even though they'd only be using a portion of it for stormwater detention?
Basically, the way the proposal is being presented at this point is the idea that we wouldn't be creating these massive ponds, but we would be more going back to it would remain a functional golf course with water features providing the relief and the water quality relief for the total suspended solids, things like of that nature. Mm-hmm. But we would be buying the front 9 and the proposal is to buy the front and back 9.
Okay.
So, but there are 7 alternatives, and I would say 2 of the 7 alternatives do not involve West Haven. At least 2 of the 7 don't, or at least 5 of the 7 don't involve West Haven area, and they still get us toward our goal. They don't get us there as quick. But we are, as a municipality, are not alone in our struggles to try to meet the state standards for stormwater and water quality. So I think it becomes an issue of good faith and then trying to balance, the objectives, these environmental objectives, the hazard objectives, and then what do citizens really want in their community.
Yeah. And it's not even state objectives or mandates, really. It's federal. It's EPA. That's where this all started from. Probably 3 decades ago, if you really
Right.
want to get right down to it, and they're just kind of getting more and more stringent and stepping up their efforts and eventually enforcement.
And I
So-
think that's the issue is, who is really going to be the watchdog of enforcement? Is it going to be the EPA? Is it going to be the state? And then to look at other communities that have already been fighting these battles of noncompliance and what does that really mean? And then how do these enforcement agencies really evaluate good faith, best efforts by a municipality? And I think all communities are going to be in this situation where, because of cash flow, because of the tax levy, mandates, I think it'll be very difficult for any municipality to meet the goals that are set forth, in the timeline.
Yeah.
So it's a very tricky situation.
Yeah. What are some of the other proposals? You mentioned that there's like 7. So the one, of course, would include buying the front and the back 9. What do some of the others involve, just in general
Sure.
terms?
There's a couple other larger sites for larger projects that have dry detention and wet detention. And then there are a lot of just trying to find these neighborhood pockets of where in Campbell and Sawyer Creek in those floodplains that don't involve such large parcels. They're smaller projects, and it's trying to kind of cobble together several projects. And so then the balancing test, the due diligence for us is to really say, what is the purchasing power per acre versus, and with that purchasing power, what are the benefits achieved by the community in meeting these goals for water retention and then water quality.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess, the other thing that has recently been in the news, there's been a number of things, but the other thing is the city has just recently worked out a deal with the school district, to buy some land from them. But the city garage is still an issue.
Right.
So what's happening with the city garage?
Well, and I don't know, if people drive by that, I think they see what the issue is on some level, facially, and I think pride, community pride in our structures and how we take care of things and utilize stewardship in our own city buildings. But for 10 years now, the city had a design plan to say, how are we going to remodel the city garage to make sure that operations are efficient, to make sure that we have consolidated our employees. I don't think very many people realize that the Department of Public Works is very much scattered in several little buildings, and so then that makes, cohesive functioning of workforce very difficult, to provide them direction. And then the other issue is, our fleet is quite large. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to happen, and just saying, what is our future plan for administrating, providing services to the community, and then making sure we have a fleet that's taken care of. There was for a while there, the master plan had included the city purchasing the armory property that is southwest of where the current central garage is, and the university had purchased that property. And then there was some other designs that required some other land purchases that were more to the west of that property. And now with the school district needing to find other maintenance facilities for itself because of the flooding damage, it just became this nice collaborative effort in saying, how can we make a win-win for citizens and taxpayers in reorganizing ourselves.
Okay, all right. Totally shifting gears here. Councilman Harold Buckles is going to be a guest on next week's show.
Okay.
And of course, he was appointed earlier this year to fill Paul Esslinger's council seat after the mayoral election. And there was a lot of hoopla at that time, as you well know, about the selection process. What should it be and how should it look and this kind of thing. In the end, the council held interviews, for lack of a better word, and Harold was selected. But no matter what we think of what he's doing, what kind of a job he's doing or whatever, the selection process itself, sooner or later, this is bound to become an issue again.
Right.
Do you think that it's time that the council, especially while it's still fresh in everybody's mind, decides on setting some kind of a selection process and making it a formal policy?
Right. You know, it's interesting. I did spend some time investigating, you know, is there a way to change the ordinance? You know, is there a mechanism that allows for citizen participation in that choice? Because to me, that's one of the sacrifices we make in the current way we handle this, is that citizens don't get the option to really weigh in on who should take the vacant seat right now. It is through application and appointment by the current elected officials. I mean, and obviously there's this other argument that, well, these other 6 people are our elected officials. We do ask them to make very weighty decisions, and how is this weighty decision any different than all the other ones we ask of our electeds? So for me, the research I did was, you know, how do we change? Is there a way to change the way we go to the ballot place on election day? And is there a way to change our ordinance to allow people to kind of vote that backup vote? And so far, I haven't been able to come up with a mechanism because we don't have districts and just the whole mechanism of how we elect people. And then I did some research on neighboring communities and what do they do? And it turns out that a lot of municipalities of our similar composition have this same issue crop up. And I think, you know, the other option for solving this problem potentially is to, and it wouldn't solve the problem all the time either, is to to stagger the mayor's term and to make the mayor's term 3 years instead of 2 years. So then that way it could maybe alleviate the situation, but there's still always that chance.
Yeah.
So as far as having a policy, you know, I'm open to suggestion about it, but I definitely haven't made up my mind because we did have so many good candidates, qualified candidates the last time around, and you know, to look at their resumes, I think the only thing that was lacking, and maybe this would have made it more political, is the idea that through this application process, citizens didn't have the opportunity to really learn much about what the applicants thought about issues.
Right.
And so that's the negative. And I don't know how we as a council can flush that out. And then there's a potential that would make it even more political and divisive than it already was, because I think people were comfortable when it was all said and done that, you know, we were fortunate this time to get a very earnest person, you know, through that selection process. So I think Harold's performance, you know, maybe makes us a little more comfortable without having all those other things in place. But I'm open to suggestion. I mean, I definitely have had other comments about you guys should have dealt with this, and I guess I just want to let you know that, you know, I did do quite a bit of research, and it turns out there isn't a good answer through ordinance or otherwise to say how do we put in parameters, and then, you know, it just as soon as you develop a mechanism, it turns out there's another flaw, you know, and so that's what I mean about this whole, well, we, you know, and I think the Northwestern had a lot of commentary about, well, geez, we don't even know what these people think about their vision or community issues, and how could you pick somebody off of a resume? How is that even relevant? We want to know about how they stand on the issues. Well, when you had a council such as ours, which I will, in my own opinion, say we are a very diverse council, and we are very split ideologically on a lot of issues right now, and so I think if we had put the political stances in, I think it would have made it more difficult and worse. And I think there would have been different allegations of politicizing that appointment process. And so I've kind of relaxed a little bit about how do we solve this problem. And I would definitely put the invitation out there that if other people have ideas, I'm willing to investigate it, because it would be nice to have confidence in a process. And I think that overall citizenry did not have confidence in that application process that we went through.
Sure.
So,
well, you know, I mean, it could be kind of a two-pronged thing. I mean, you know, you guys could still make the ultimate decision, but there could be kind of a meet and greet with the candidates.
Yeah.
You know, where it doesn't turn into a shout fest. But I think we've seen some really exemplary displays of you know, professionalism and maturity at some of the more controversial and passionate issues lately, and so, you know, maybe that's a possibility. But I just think it's really important that the council decides which way they want to go with this for selecting someone
before
and make it official, you know, so that it doesn't rear its ugly head again the way it did this past April and May.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think other cities have an actual policy stated and it's on their books, and that way it's done, and you don't have to deal with that aspect of it while you're
Right.
trying to deal with other things.
That's a good idea. And,
So-
and I think that maybe we can borrow a little bit from what we had done with the city manager search, in that we did have the finalists, make that public presentation, and we did have citizens come, and that was a very positive experience. And I think a lot of the citizenry that engaged in that got a lot out of it, of saying, I've observed these 5 finalists, I'm comfortable, I know who I like and who I don't like, and we're able to comment on it. So that is actually a very good idea.
Yeah. The one thing that I heard a lot of things, as you probably
I bet
did
you
too.
do, yeah. You can
As you
answer.
do too. But one thing that I did hear was that, well, you guys didn't ask any questions of anybody. So, that's part of the interview process. That is the interview process. They tell you things and you ask them to tell you other things.
Right.
And there were no questions asked.
And I think,
And what happened there? That there weren't any.
I will tell you, to be honest, I had vetted those resumes. I had vetted the information I had in front of me, and I had a couple people that I was very interested in, and I was very much concerned about this idea of politicizing the vote, because I didn't want their answer about one particular issue to, like, okay, now I reject you as a candidate. That doesn't necessarily, which of these issues then is the citizenry at large thinking I'm rejecting by my non-vote there.
Yeah.
And I guess I really walked into this process, and for better or worse, initially thought I would really like to see a veteran who had served on the city council come back to kind of hold stewardship over that seat, because there really wasn't, in the bottom line for me, I really wanted this to be an open seat for this year's election, because I wanted to get back to the citizens' pick, okay, not the council. That's in my heart what I think that seat should be about. So, that's my explanation. I don't know what everyone else is going to have for a why didn't you ask the tough questions of the candidates, but that was kind of mine, because I wanted them to come in with I want to support you as a fellow council member up here in the dais with me, and it's not going to be because we disagree about deer or we disagree about water retention ponds. I want you to think I either voted for you because you should be serving here.
Okay.
That's my answer.
All right. Good one.
Thanks, Cheryl.
All right. Now let's move on to the leach. We just read in the paper, like in the last week or so, that the leach has really been performing very well under the operation and management of the Parks Department, and in particular Tom Stefani and his assistant Trish. It's amazing to me that with everything else that Tom and his entire department had to do, in addition to that, they could still do this good of a job, and you've got a professional management company like PMI. This is what they do. They manage facilities or venues like this, and they couldn't do this. They could not perform as well as Tom and his staff have so far. So I think that says a lot about, it says a lot about PMI in a negative sense. It says a lot of
saying it.
And it says a lot about Tom and his staff from their perspective and the good that they've done. And I mean, the year isn't over yet. This is only mid-September, so we'll see what happens. But I think that they've really done a commendable job, and just simple little things like putting signs up in high traffic areas of town, advertising upcoming events. I mean, it's such a simple thing, and you wonder why PMI didn't do it.
Well, I have to say I'm excited about the organic growing of festivals and community events, and that is what that place was designed, as a venue to bring community in and to have celebration, locally. And I think that it is a great success to see usership of that, because in the end, it is a taxpayer-supported entity, and the idea that those gates were closed and the taxpayer was not able to use that facility.
They were locked out, basically.
I mean, there is something wrong about that. And so to me, I'm very happy about it. I guess at this point, as a council member, I'll be interested to see how the budget process goes, how the recruitment for the new parks director, the search and screen, and going through the hiring process of that person. And then I'm wondering how our organizational chart will change if if it will or not, because to me, I too am very happy that that was successful. You know, I don't know with the new hiring of person or people, you know, how they're going to delegate those responsibilities.
Yeah.
But I would want, you know, for every jewel in this necklace to sparkle, you know. And so I guess I wonder, you know, how was the performance of other things in the Parks Department, and was there a drop-off in performance of something else that, you know, something else had to maybe get less attention because something was focused over. And one of the other things I would say, you know, as a praise to Tom, but also of city management and decisions made by administration, is that the Grand Opera House at one point had been managed by the Parks Department, and then that got moved over to more administrative services. So then that took a little something off of Tom's plate, so then maybe that helped free up the time.
Right.
So it's just really management, and I'm very happy about the success, and I you know, I think we can only improve.
Absolutely. Well, and of course, Tom has now retired for health reasons, and we certainly wish him well in his struggles. But one of the crew here has heard, and I don't know how reliable his information is, who he heard it from, but there has been some rumbling apparently in the community that there may be a movement afoot to combine the Park and Recs Department with the school district's, or rather our Parks Department with the school district's rec department. Have you heard that at all?
I haven't.
I mean, I just don't see how that would work. I mean, I know that we're trying to eliminate duplication of efforts, and we're trying to consolidate where we can,
Right.
and have collaborative efforts. But I mean, I see a lot of problems with that right from the get-go.
I have not. Nothing has come to my attention proposing that scenario, so I can't comment officially on that idea. I just, you know, that's one of the things where you really have to analyze any kind of collaborative venture to really understand, you know, what are we losing, what are we getting, and you don't know. And then the other issue is, you know, the school district does serve a different population center than the city does, and that is always a thing where, you know, people can speak in generalizations about what taxpayer do I really represent and what's my fiduciary duty. And I think we even saw that in the land acquisition process that went through, is people are like, well, wait a minute, you know, where is my fiduciary duty holden? And I guess for me as a city councilor, I want to make sure that we are receiving quality attention to our parks. And I'd have to say that with limited resources right now, we don't, even the gravel, even paying for the gravel and the trees and all of that stuff is very difficult. And those are the things that get cut in our budget processes. The first things that get, you know, when they're looking for something to trim, they trim on gravel, they trim on wood chips, they trim on trees. And, you know, so I can understand the pressure to say, well, maybe we need to make our Parks Department small, you know, smaller, but I truly, truly believe that is not the place in our organizational chart where we would take people away, you know, or consolidate.
I'm not sure that it was to make the department smaller, but it was like to have one person heading up everything. But that's a lot to head up.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So it would either be a staff potential reduction. I mean, the only way it would be a benefit is if you reduced, you know, financially, fiscally in a budget. And in the end, I would bet that's not really a benefit. I mean, just an end product.
I just see a lot of problems and potential nightmares ahead with something like that.
So. Like I said, and logistics, and who's your master, who's your fiduciary duty to, and you have two different sets of taxpayers there, and I don't know. I mean, it worked, you know, some of the financial collaborations work very well, like the pool works very well. I just don't know if the whole thing would work.
But that's still operated by the city.
Right, but there's a financial,
Exactly, and so, you know, it probably just should stay under the city umbrella and be done with it. You know? But
and who knows, maybe that's what they're thinking. Maybe they want to, for a fee, hand over their rec department. You know, I don't know. I've never heard anything about this process.
I don't know.
So we'll see what happens, Cheryl. Maybe
There
it's a
you go.
prediction. The Karnak, you know, predicts. I predict this is happening. I have no idea. So.
Yeah, you've mentioned the budget a couple times, and certainly, you know, with time running out, I want to talk about that. Mark Roloff, the city manager, was on the show recently, and he wants to come back when he's got more things formulated with respect to the budget. So I'm always grateful for when he wants to come on. But what have you in your discussions and what you've been hearing around City Hall, what have you been able to glean so far about what we're in for come budget time?
Well, we're in for cuts, and
With personnel or services or both?
I really think it's going to, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm
Yeah.
one of 7, but my prediction is it's going to come back to the gravel and the trees
Yeah.
and shorting on those kind of things. And every time I look at the conference attendance, training, staff training, those seem to be the places that get hit right out of the gate.
Yeah.
And then the issue is maybe we're going to be cutting back on vehicle purchases, fleet purchases, which those that may be good, that may be bad, you never know. But the operational budget will be tight. I've definitely heard beginning the insurance premiums are going up again. Healthcare will always be an issue in the benefits package and how that affects our operational budget. And it would be my hope. We've had over the last 10 years we've had quite a few staff reductions, and I would hope we wouldn't have to do that again. I'm also hoping that we get an enhanced service with the change to this single stream recycling. I mean, I still want to advocate to say that, supposedly, we had a savings of 3 people by moving to single stream, and one of my priorities is to say, I want to keep those people employed here, and what I want them to do is go back to their core function of street crew and really make positive improvements on our street. Okay, and that right now, most people maybe don't know this, that our sanitation and our street crew are cross-trained, and many times when one division needs help, they pull people off the street crew to do sanitation. And so the benefit supposedly of the single stream recycling, on one hand it's to save money. In my mind, it's really to enhance the services that we provide in our street crew. So we have people out there doing the work, and that's where we get the complaints. So that's what I want. So I'm hoping that we're able to keep the staffing levels where they are, but then again, there's these cuts, they're coming.
Well, speaking of single stream, and we're down to about a minute and a half here, but as we're taping this, we don't have our bins yet.
No, we don't.
But they should be coming, I understand, sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
So we've got that to look forward to, or not, depending on your perspective.
Right.
But what have you heard from people since this was approved? Anything?
Well, I've heard a lot of dissatisfaction from people who are one person households, or people who have 5 apartments in one building and they're all single occupancy, and saying, really, do I need 5 carts? And then a little bit of confusion about how do I place my cart on the street if I have a street that's highly parked with cars. And I've been putting a lot of faith in this educational process, and I'm really hoping that the administration lives up to that educational process, and then that we also do make some efforts, when we sell permits to park on the streets, that we really do something to educate the drivers of, if you have this permit, we want to hold you responsible to understanding these other etiquette things that affect our homeowners. And so I think there needs to be a lot of education there. And the other thing, briefly, is that most people don't know this, that the garbage tipping fee went up on the garbage that we dispose of as a municipality. So if it's true what they say, that these carts encourage people to recycle more, that'll be good, because that means we have less garbage and we'll pay a lower fee. And that's what we need to do more than ever now that fee has gone up. So
good. Well, and I'll answer your one question for you, because when Mark was here, we focused probably 3/4 of the time on this.
Okay.
As far as the parking issue, if they put it close to their apron, people aren't supposed to park right up to the apron, but the trucks are apparently equipped with an extension. The arm extends out something like, I think Mark said, 10 feet. So it can actually go up over a car. So there you go.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I learned something on the show today. Very good.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by one of Jess's fellow councilmen, Bob Poeschl. We'll be right back. Thanks much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dear Mom and Dad, well, I finally have some time off, so I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get through the bad ones. Mostly we have each other, and that's what keeps us going. And Mom, since you asked, if anyone wants to help, just tell them to contact the USO. You can't believe how much they do for us. With love, your son, Michael.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
We were in an emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have
Right.
beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah, right?
All right, welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. Bob Poeschl from the Oshkosh Common Council is here now, and we appreciate you stopping by. We know you've got a busy schedule too, so thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You were mentioning just before the camera started rolling again here that this is, you're thinking, your first or second interview since you were elected to office.
My first, I think it's probably my second interview, TV interview since being elected.
Well, we're honored and pleased that you're here. So, but speaking of that, you know, it's been just a little less than 6 months now since you've been elected, and probably about 5 months since you've actually taken office. Yeah. How's it been so far?
It's been a learning experience.
Yeah.
It's been it's quite a different, it's a huge change for the transition for myself, because I went from being working a great deal in a grassroots level in the community and working and advocating on a totally different level to now being in a position where people are talking to you a lot. They're calling you at all different times of the day, sending you hundreds of emails, and learning how to balance out all of that and balance out everything else. I'm still trying to figure out how to make the right decision sometimes, when depending on the issues and such, and the amount of research that it takes to going into that it's sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah.
But
but no regrets.
No, none at all.
Just
none at
some
all.
surprises.
Yes.
And
I'm in for a lot more work than what I was expecting,
Yeah.
and I have no problem with that in any way. It just makes me. I have to force myself to be a little bit more efficient with my time. So.
well, and prioritizing.
Yep.
You know, and that's never a bad thing to
Nope.
get everything in the right priority either. So, but, well, good. Well, you know, I think it always is tougher than what it seems.
Nope.
And it didn't take you too long to figure that one out. So,
I think I figured that one out in my first meeting. So.
well, the first meeting, are you talking about the first meeting or the organizational meeting? Or both?
No, the first meeting was actually the eye-opening meeting for me.
Okay.
The organizational meeting wasn't. The thing that's the most memorable about my first full meeting was that I ran on neighborhood involvement, and then I also ran on updating our infrastructure, reducing floods, updating our infrastructure for the most part. And in my first meeting, those two platforms collided.
Yeah.
Because we had a neighborhood who had gotten our street, virtually from Knapp Street to Ohio Street, had went out and got signatures saying, we don't want you to update our infrastructure underneath our street, because they just had a new street put in. I believe it was probably 80% of the neighbors had signed saying that. But when the city staff came back to us and said, well, there's 3 different dates for sewer or for water pipes, under there. The one dates all the way back. One dates all the way back to the early 1900s. We've got some in the 30s and then some in the 50s, and the oldest one is starting to crumble on the newest ones.
Mm-hmm.
You're put in a position: do I stick with the neighborhood, with what they're doing, or do I go with updating the infrastructure? In that case, eye-opening experience of, I have to make, you're in a position where you have to make the right decision, whether you like it or not, whether with the repercussions of it. I sided with updating the infrastructure because I look at that and say, though it's going to put some dollars on their tax bill and on their bills with the city, in the long run, their infrastructure is going to be updated.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, we're not going to have the problems in the long run. So
Well, are they paying for the total infrastructure being redone, or is that not?
Some of them, they were paying for half because it was a full street, and so you would pay for your half up to the center. And then at the same time, what was also going on is that they were also putting in, if I remember correctly, they were also putting in updated, not only just water lines and sewers and laterals, but also I think they were updating some of the electric components also.
Well, maybe. So. I mean, I've had 2 streets redone since I've owned property in the city, and it seems to me, of course, it's been a while since they did that, but it seems to me that the sanitary sewer was automatically replaced.
Yeah.
If in my case, mine had been just a few years earlier than that, and there was documentation of that, so that didn't have to be done. But I know that that's kind of an automatic thing. So what else gets done then besides the sanitary sewers? It's the pipe itself then?
Yeah, it's the pipe that gets done.
So why couldn't that just automatically be done when a street is redone? And that way you avoid having to tear up recently done streets in some cases.
That is how it's done now.
Okay.
And so back when they redid that road, they ignored that.
All right.
So it was, and I believe it was 10, 15 years ago, they went in and did some changes, but they didn't do all the changes. Now when they go and they tear up a street, they update everything.
Okay. Because that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of
sense.
You betcha, you betcha. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the, we're talking about storm sewers and laterals and that kind of thing. And as we're taping this, there is a meeting upstairs going on. It's a public informational type meeting on stormwater detention out at West Haven Golf Course, which is one of the proposals that's on the table right now. I know you said you weren't up there tonight. Were you there at because there was a first one held earlier this week. Were you at that one by chance?
I was at the Tuesday night one.
And what have you been hearing? What did you observe while you were there? What are people saying?
What I observed the most was that there's still a great amount of concerns in regards to residents who reside around the golf course into the updated plan that the city's putting forward. From the residents, what I'm hearing is that they actually don't really know if it's needed and such like that.
They don't know if stormwater detention is needed?
They know that stormwater detention is needed. They don't know whether putting them in the midst of a golf course is needed to do that. So, and that's the greatest amount of questioning. They're not questioning that stormwater detention is needed, but it's about where it's needed.
Yeah.
And so you heard a lot of questions that talked about going back to the source of where where water is retained the most, and we're, that brings up farmland and going west of the city. And some people had concerns that we weren't working, as a city, weren't working to as far as to the greatest amount that we could with the neighboring communities,
the townships,
to address that concern. Partially, the farmers would love to have a lot of that water. So.
Sure. Yeah.
So part of the concern that I have with it is that you hear this about it being being a golf course in just the way that it's built is a natural retention pond in the sense that it's made to retain water in the first place. How deep and how much is of question. The challenge that I have with it is that it's still not a natural retention area because you still have to pipe in water into the course area. And so that means that there's still going to be standing water even as it gets to the golf course area. And so that means we're still not fully addressing stormwater retention in any way. So, and which leads me also back to, the part of the problem with this is that the problem that we have with this is that it's also being addressed in the way that we developed our community.
Sure.
The example that was put out there the most is that Sawyer Creek has actually been modified greatly in its water course, which leads to its overflowage a great amount of times, even in just a regular storm sometimes. So we're not really addressing that. We're dredging. We're talking about dredging Sawyer Creek a little bit, but we're not addressing the 90-degree human-made turns in it that are still going to cause some of those problems. We're not. I think in the long run, if we were to do West Haven, it's going to solve some of the pollution problems that we have in regards to total suspended solids that are out there. But when it actually comes to reducing flooding, I'm not absolutely sold on it yet. Partially because I'm just knowing that we have to pipe water into it means that there's still going to be areas of overflow in order for that to make that happen. So.
Well, it's not an easy solution, and of course, the government is mandating that something be done.
Yep.
Citizens have demanded that something be done so that we don't have, flooding issues to the degree that we had last summer. Although last summer was kind of a rare occurrence that we got, bombed with two really bad storms, especially so close together. But
we're really torn as a community in regards to this, and as my role as an elected official, we're torn between environmental concerns coming down from the DNR, saying you've got to remove all this without putting a great amount of teeth to it,
and the EPA
and the EPA, but then we also have to address flooding, and they don't. They
sometimes
don't
never the
go
twain
hand in
shall
hand,
meet,
Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's tough. Harold Buckles is going to be a guest on next week's show, and of course, as you know, because you were part of this process, he was appointed earlier this year. After Paul Esslinger's seat was vacated following the mayoral election. There was a lot of discussion about the process, how it should work, how it should look, what it should be, and the manner in which someone should take that council seat. In the end, the council, held interviews, if you will. They took applications from candidates and made a selection. Harold was the person that you guys chose. You're obviously comfortable with the process as it happened?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I had some concerns with the process. I had some concerns all the way back to the beginning of it. What I really would have liked to have done is figured out a way that outside of the election, people using the election scenario, is figuring out a way that citizens could have had more choice in that selection. I was very uncomfortable, and I think it was probably clear that I was very uncomfortable with that decision on many different levels, because I had a concern just appointing the fourth vote getter because everyone voted for three in my mind, and the numbers just didn't turn out that way, and so I would have liked to have had some type of runoff election or a special election for it. It's a little bit costly. It's the most democratic way of doing it. I actually suggested doing something by absentee ballots and such like that. Didn't really have the numbers ready for it of how much of an increase it would be for it. The interview process, I tried my hardest to not really have any sort of criteria ahead of time. I wanted to look at the person. I wanted to see what that person was willing to offer. I didn't ask any questions because
No one did.
No one did. I was really wanting to see how that person interacted through that interview. And one could say that it really wasn't an interview. It was more of like a...
I would be one of those people, Bob, that would be saying that.
And you know, and thinking back, that's probably the one thing that I would change more. I was still a little shy at that point.
Yeah.
In that, and as you notice, as things progressed, I've gotten a little bit more into asking questions. I was still learning the ropes at that point. So that would be my one change, is that I would probably go back and ask a little bit more questions. I did catch beforehand a little bit, and I probably wouldn't get into political questions of that sort. I beat you to the gun on that one.
Oh, I wasn't even going to go there. I wasn't going to go there.
But I think that we really, there's, even when I ran for office, I didn't try to espouse political opinions. I tried to espouse my opinion of how I felt I could create change. And I think we got a little bit of that through what we call the interview process. Yeah. But we could have gotten a little bit more of that. And my criteria was that the person really just needed to fit the most basic criteria, and that is that they're a citizen of Oshkosh, is that they're over the age of 18, and that they want to serve their community.
They all wanted to do that, though. They all met that criteria.
They did.
So what was it about Harold Buckles that made you feel as you did?
What it was about Harold was there was a couple things that I'm going to be very straightforward with this on air. Is that Harold, you could tell by looking at Harold's experience through his work and through his personal life, especially through he had a level of commitment to him, and it was very apparent in looking at his resume, and very apparent in his presentation that he gave that he was very prepared for this, and was very, he had a great amount of tools that he had already created for himself that made him a great candidate for it. And for me, I also looked at it pragmatically. I could look up on that dais, and I could see who was going to vote where. And that's an eye-opening experience to me, because I actually didn't come into that meeting with my decision made, and I think that was apparent.
Yeah.
And when I looked at that dais, I looked at it and said, in my mind, every single one of you already had your mind made up before you came into the meeting. I think I don't know that for sure, but that's exactly what my thinking.
Feeling.
That was my feeling. I'm not speaking on behalf of any of the council people, but that's what I felt looking at the council, looking at the candidates who were put out there. My list of candidates were actually really diverse, and I don't remember the names of them, but some of them, Harold was on my list. Jeff Hall, ironically, my greatest opponent of that evening, pretty much, was on that list. And there was a couple other people who I can't remember their names, who were more of just your regular normal people, community citizens, who were on my list. But what it really came down to is I looked at it, and when it came to me, we had already had 3 people that had already gone, two people I think had gone for Harold already. I look at it realistically and look at the dais and say, well, there's 2 people that I know that are going to go for Mr. Hentz automatically, and then I know that there's more than I just basically said. And one of my other things too is that I also said that I was looking for a person who hadn't held an office before. That if there was one piece of criteria that I put out, is that I wanted it to be a person that could get the experience from this, and such. And so that's kind of how I came to my decision on it.
Well, just real quickly, do you think it's time that this council then make a decision on how they're going to fill future vacancies and actually make it a policy? Because this may very well come up again, and it doesn't necessarily have to be as the result of a mayoral election. I mean, someone can get sick and have serious health issues, someone's job may take them out of the community. There's 101 different reasons why someone may have to leave. So this could easily come up again.
Yeah. There's a side of me that feels that the council should still have the in instances like that of sickness and such like that, or job change or whatever. I think there should be a level of appointment within the council, but I always believe that there should be a level of special election too. Yeah. There needs to be that component for it. I think any council person should feel uncomfortable appointing someone to sit on a dais next to them without that person being elected. One thing that I'm willing to add, and I've talked to the city attorney Lynn Lawrenson in regards to amending the current ordinance in regards to the length of term of the mayor. So one thing that you can look for probably in the next 6 months is me bringing forth a resolution to make the term three years instead of keeping it at the 2 years.
And your logic there is what?
My logic is that it lessens the chance of us having to do this again, and it puts it on that staggered term a little bit more, so that we don't have to be absolutely in that position.
Every other election, though, would it not still come up? I'd have to sit and think about that for a minute.
From the research that I've done, if we change the term to 3-year term, it's going to stagger that term.
Okay.
Well, may not somewhere down the line. You're right, but let's put it in different words. This is an area that I'm willing to address, and I'm willing to look into areas.
Right.
I'm willing to look into it to address it because it concerned me a great deal.
Okay. I know our time is quickly running out here, but I wanted to address O'Brien's.
Sure.
Because that was a very long meeting. It was a very drawn-out discussion on whether or not to renew their liquor license. Of course, for viewers who aren't aware, the police chief was saying he was recommending that it not be renewed. It eventually did get renewed on a vote of 5-2, and you were one of the 5 that voted to renew it. I was interested in how that vote went down. I found it very curious because it just seemed to me that the things that the chief was bringing forward were pretty overwhelming. But it went down the way it went down, and he got his license renewed. Now, since then, there have been additional incidents, one in particular that I can think of, and it involved, I guess, allegedly somebody getting pistol whipped over there or just outside of it or whatever. Looking back on this, do you have any regrets about the way you voted on that? I mean, hindsight's always 20/20, but okay.
I have no regrets in that vote. My reasoning for that vote is that the chief took what's the plan that they use?
Abatement.
They took the abatement plan and they put it to a business. And the one thing that they didn't do that they would do in a neighborhood, if this were a residential home, they would put a timeline to it. They didn't put a timeline to it, and so
the timeline's built into the ordinance, though, is it not? I thought that it was.
It could be, but I guess, in my mind, looking at what was in front of me, there wasn't any timelines in it in any way. So that was one of my premise with it, is that if we would have put a timeline on it, these changes would have happened.
Okay. So now he's got his license renewed, and there has been another problem.
I've actually spoken with the chief.
Okay.
When I voted to allow him to retain his license, I sternly said, you need to follow what they tell you. If you don't, when you come back here, I'm not going to vote to approve it. I've since having those conversations, having that vote, and I've had a brief conversation with the chief, stating that if you bring this up in front of me again, the chances are that I'm going to vote in your favor. And the reason being is that I believe that we need to be, there is a level of safety that needs to be addressed there. And I felt that I felt that the information that was being given to us by the chief was very valid information. But I believe that there needed to be a little bit more structure to his information. If that would have been there, I probably would have voted for it.
I'm going to have to look up the abatement ordinance, because I was pretty sure, I mean, I was in part of like a little focus group, if you will, when that whole ordinance was being created. And I thought, I mean, it's been a number of years, but I thought for certain that there was a very, very, you know, specific outline of the way things happened. And I thought that there was a timeline built into it.
And there could have been. And then, you know, the other side of that argument is that why did we wait so long? Why did we wait until a week before licenses expire to say, don't give them their license back? That's part of, you know, partially the current. So I was really uncomfortable taking away livelihood, but I would have been very comfortable saying, we're going to suspend your use of your license for 30 days for you to get your act together. And if you don't get your act together in that time, we're going to take it away. The evidence, the information that the chief gave us would have wholly supported that option. Yeah. But just to take away someone's livelihood, though they've been talking with him and working with him, trying to work with him, still just abruptly, I viewed it as being abruptly taking away livelihood, his business from him.
Yeah.
That was part of my concerns with it.
Only a couple minutes left here, Bob. The budget is going to be coming up soon. This, of course, is your first kick at the cat here with the budget. You know, are you? Well, I'm not going to ask if you're looking forward to it. I don't know that anyone looks forward to the budget hearings and so forth. They're grueling and sometimes pretty unpleasant. But what have you heard in the way of what city staff and what taxpayers have to look forward to as far as the budget goes?
Well, we're looking at a large loss of revenues that aren't coming in from the state. So obviously that means some types of cuts in services and such like that. With me in the budget, it's a learning process. Yeah. I've never had to deal with a large budget, let alone a budget of roughly $64 million. And so that's, to me, you're going to see me be probably very quiet, but I'm going to do a lot of research behind the scenes on it. There's money that we're losing from it. There's services that might be cut in the end. But at the same time, we also need to maintain our workforce, our quality workforce that we have. And so that's going to be the balance in all of that. So trying to also implement things like bike lanes and bike racks and pedestrian lanes, trying to instill small parts of a vision that I ran on and that I believe in for the city of Oshkosh is going to be a learning experience in this whole process.
Well, good luck with it.
So thank you.
And thanks for being here.
And no problem.
And as always, thanks to all of you. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Keep your eye on us. We've got Our Eye on Oshkosh.
up.